Hello, I'm Cambria, and welcome to AdVocation Nation podcast, a podcast dedicating to highlighting different advocacy stories and journeys from many walks of life. I decided to start this podcast with the goal of educating people about the many different forms that advocacy can take on by interviewing outstanding advocates in various professional, personal, and volunteer roles. Each of these guests have great wisdom to share about what it means to be an advocate and ways that you, the listener, can advocate and support ongoing efforts in your own life. Today, I am joined by Mary Steele. Mary is the Executive Director of Compass Housing Alliance, which develops and provides essential services and affordable housing for homeless and low-income people in the greater Puget Sound region. They work with local governments and partner agencies to find innovative and creative solutions for housing that serves everyone. Mary practiced law for 25 years at Davis Wright Tremaine, one of Seattle's largest law firms, and has served at the organization New Horizons, a Seattle food bank, and has plenty more community experience. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So to start off, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background, how you got into nonprofit work, and especially what led you into your role at Compass Housing Alliance today?
Well, it was a little serendipitous, not particularly planned. I had practiced law for a number of years and decided it was time to take a step back from that, and was raising a kid and looking at some other options. And I got a call from New Horizons. They were in trouble. They had had a failed leadership transition, and they eventually asked me if I would step in as an interim executive director there. And I agreed to do that. And 8 years later, I had finished my interim role. And actually, I had become the permanent director for quite a while. But then I realized I did enjoy the interim role of really working with organizations that were in some kind of transition difficulty. And so I became essentially a professional interim director, and was doing that when I came to Compass Housing. They had had a transition, a loss of an executive director. We're looking for someone with some experience in shelter and other operations. And after I started doing it, realized I quite enjoyed the organization and the team. And so now I've been the permanent executive director and have been here a little over a year.
That's great. And I know you've shared this a little bit with me, but how would you say your legal career has kind of helped you transition into the nonprofit world, or what skills have you kind of taken from that experience and been able to apply to different fields?
Well, one of the things that you learn in law school is how to learn, right? You learn about how to quickly come up to speed with any number of different professions, organizations. You need to learn quickly. The law applies to everyone, right? So when you're a lawyer, you have to jump in and learn what your client is doing and how the law might apply to what they do. And so I found that to be very useful in the nonprofit world, just quickly assessing a situation, determining what the strategies are needed to move forward, determining what the challenges are. And I will say that one thing I had to learn was more about how to manage the people, because that was not something that I had had to do quite as much as a lawyer. But I learned how to do that as well. So
Well, apparently so, because you've been an interim executive director and executive director for years and years now. And yeah, I really appreciate your story, because I feel like it's a good example of ways that you can continue on your career pathway and you don't necessarily need to stick to one particular area your whole life. You can kind of move around and use your skills and passions and lean into that. And so I appreciate that.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about Compass Housing Alliance, what you do, what needs you meet, how do you serve in the community?
The Compass works in the greater Puget Sound region, primarily focused on Seattle. We have 4 emergency shelters that we work. So we have about 300 beds. We work with folks who are living on the streets and providing them with what they need to move forward. And so it's not just shelter, though. We have a center in Pioneer Square We've been in Pioneer Square. This is our 100th anniversary. So we started in Pioneer Square and we're still there. At our center, we offer everything that someone might need to move forward. And so, for example, we have hygiene services, so showers and laundry. We have meal service, but we also have mail service. We get about 16,000 pieces of mail a month for folks who do not have another way to have an address. And so we get things like government benefits and voter registration and ballots and all kinds of things that we provide. Now we're working with folks who are getting their stimulus checks, so helping with that. And we have a bank. We think it may be the only one in the entire country that serves folks who are low income and can't get banking services elsewhere. In addition to our services for folks who are homeless, we also have almost 700 affordable apartments. So we serve people who have income of, typically 0 to 30% of the area median income, so very low income folks. We have veterans units, we have permanent supportive housing, we have seniors, we have families, just about anyone you could think of living with Compass.
Wow, that's really neat. And I think it's cool to hear the many different levels that Compass takes on, whether it be just kind of entry level, okay, how can we meet basic needs such as showers or food? And then a step up to, okay, let's start with savings and banking and getting in good financial habits. And then all the way up to, okay, let's find housing. So that's really interesting. And that's a cool model. Do you know if other organizations across the country, I'm just curious, have looked to you guys as your model to like adopt that?
Yeah, we have people coming to visit the bank, for example, regularly. But yes, there are a number of other organizations that provide a similar range of services because we know what folks need. At Compass, we talk about stability, growth, and community, that is what we want to do. We want to start with helping people become stable and then growth. What are their goals and desires? How can we help them meet those? And then community, forming community around people, because that's what's going to keep them from moving back into street life.
Yeah, and I think that definitely is an important part of advocacy, even is just having that continued relationship and building off of that, not just kind of stopping in and dropping a service off and leaving, but really just connecting on a deeper level. So that's interesting. And so this kind of ties into my next question, but basically, what kind of advocacy work do you do in your everyday life? How would you describe your role being that of an advocate?
Well, let me talk about what we do at Compass and how that plays into what I do personally. But we talk about wanting to advocate on a micro level, a meso level, and a macro level. So on the micro level, we work with people to learn how to advocate for themselves. If you have a dispute with someone and you're in our shelter, we sit down and we help people learn how to work out their disputes with each other and learn how to express themselves. But then moving to the meso level, how do you advocate for yourself within an organization? If someone has a grievance, we have a grievance policy and we teach people how to use it. And I often will end up responding to some of those. And not just our guests, but also our employees, working with them. They belong at certain level of staff belong to a union. So figuring out how they use the union to advocate. And then on the macro level, it's how do you advocate in the community? And for me, it's about how do I advocate for Compass? So for example, advocating with the city of Seattle to make sure that their compensation to organizations that are working in this area are adequate for us to pay our employees a living wage. Advocating with the state around legislation, at all levels, we are working on advocacy.
Yeah, that's really interesting and just wonderful to hear that there's so many different levels. It's not just confined necessarily to one area, but there's kind of this ripple effect. It seems like when one area is impacted, the rest are. And that's why it's so important to have advocates on different places and levels, whether it be state or federal or local. And
there are a number of organizations that we work together with on joint advocacy, especially around homelessness issues.
Yeah. And so my next question for you would just be, what does advocacy mean to you personally? And I guess how has it opened doors for you, whether it be your professional life, your personal life, volunteer roles? What are just some lessons you might have taken away from that?
Well, you know that in some countries, advocate means lawyer, they're essentially the same thing, And so I will say that as an individual, I find it easier sometimes to advocate for others than myself. But you learn when you are advocating for others how to do it for yourself as well. So I really enjoy being someone else's voice. But that requires listening, right? You need to listen and learn what people want you to advocate for. And sometimes it's different from what I personally might think that they would want or should want, right? But that person is the one who gets to decide. It's not me. So figuring out, how I can do that within my own ethical boundaries has been an interesting journey.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it even relates back to what you were saying about helping people on like the macro and micro levels and being able to help them know how to advocate for themselves. And it sounds like for you that part of your advocacy work and being a voice for others is helping people find their voices. So it's a really cool cycle, especially when it's kind of the cycle of empowerment and hopefully helping other people learn how to step up and kind of take charge of their lives.
For sure, for sure.
And so, what advice would you give to folks maybe just looking to get more involved in their community or wanting to support ongoing advocacy efforts, whether it's homelessness, which you work with, low income that you also work with, or just any like general practical advice at all?
Well, I'd say, the first step is listen and learn. Really get involved with a heart and an intention to be a listener before you speak. And also determine when it's appropriate for you to speak and when it's appropriate for you, again, as you were saying, to empower others to speak. And I would say, I'm going to, especially as white folks who may be now looking at how we can get involved with and work with the communities of color. It's often not our job to be the advocate. It's our job to be the support of folks who are advocating. So really be thoughtful listeners first, and then see where your appropriate role is.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice. And definitely there are different facets of advocacy. And it's, you can support ongoing efforts like you're saying and really use if you have certain skills or passion, not putting yourself in the spotlight or not putting yourself at the front of the agenda, but stepping back and being like, okay, well, what's the real issue here? How can I support what's already going on? And I think going into advocacy is definitely a journey of growth and it's a constant choice to listen and to hear other people around you. It's not necessarily a skill you can master. And so I think definitely your work and Compass Housing Alliance just really speaks to that ongoing effort and ongoing need for listening and just supporting people in the ways that they want to be met and need to be met and how they express that.
Yeah, I think advocates need to be very connected to their communities. We can really lose our way if we lose that connection.
Yeah, I think so. It's not just a suit you can really try on. It's learning how to just step back and really, if you are interested in an area, then learn more about it, educate yourself, and then go into that. And I think that for sure, Compass Housing Alliance and your job speaks to that. And so, my final question for you is how can we support Compass Housing Alliance? Do you have volunteer programs? Are you looking for donations? What can people do if they're looking to get more involved, particularly in Seattle and in homeless issues?
Well, I would say the first step would be to go to our website, which is compasshousingalliance.org. And there are a number of volunteer opportunities. Frankly, COVID has circumscribed those quite a bit, unfortunately. We can't do a lot of the in-person work. For example, my office is in one of our apartment buildings. And I used to love going out at 3 o'clock when the school bus would come by and all the kids would come out and just rush by on their way to their after school program that we have here. Well, we can't have outsiders right now involved in that, but we hope to be able to open up those things again. And those opportunities will be on our website. We have an event coming up, virtual event on May 16th, celebrating our 100th anniversary. And that is on our website as well. And you can watch that half-hour event hosted by Rick Steves, and I will be on there as well. And I think it will be quite a good way to learn about Compass. Those are a couple ways.
Yeah, that's great. And oh my goodness, I can't believe 100 years. I didn't realize that Compass has been around for that long. That's amazing.
Yeah, we started as the Sailors and Loggers mission in Pioneer Square, started by a Lutheran pastor from Sweden.
Oh, wow. I'm also a history major. I'm history and political science. So the history major in me is going to go research that as soon as we're off this call, because that is so interesting.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for just taking the time to chat and teach us a little bit more about Compass Housing Alliance and some of the issues. Real quick, is there anything that like Seattleites should keep an eye out, like policy wise or just homeless wise, or should be aware of, especially in our community? It's kind of a curveball. I didn't prepare you for that question, but yeah.
Well, one of the big things is, every community in King County has been operating separately on the issues of homelessness. And we are now about to have a regional homelessness authority. It's just getting started. So we're very interested to see how that's going to impact the way our entire community deals with the issue of homelessness.
That's great. And I think that also just, again, relates back to the issue of working together in community and how community is such a central part of advocacy. You can't really have strong advocacy if you don't have that community to center it around. So that's
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mary. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope all goes well, and congrats on 100 years for Compass. That's awesome.
Thank you so much.